The walls are closing in. Right now, as I speak, Keir Starmer's political career hangs by a thread. Behind the polished doors of Number 10, panic has erupted, secret recordings have surfaced. Documents that were never meant to see daylight are now spreading across every news channel in Britain. And what they reveal is nothing short of catastrophic. This isn't just another political scandal that'll blow over in a week. This is the kind of bombshell that ends careers, destroys legacies, and rewrites history. The Prime Minister, the man who promised to restore integrity to British politics, is now facing allegations so damaging that even his closest allies are reportedly distancing themselves. Whispers in Westminster suggest resignation papers are already being drafted. The question isn't if he'll step down anymore, the question is when. And what you're about to discover will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the current government. The leak came out of nowhere. Late last night, during what should have been a routine news broadcast, an investigative journalist dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through Westminster. Classified documents, internal communications and recorded conversations allegedly involving the Prime Minister himself were suddenly public. And the contents absolutely explosive. We're talking about accusations that strike at the very heart of democratic integrity. According to these leaked materials, decisions that affected millions of British citizens were allegedly influenced by factors that had nothing to do with public interest. The timing couldn't be worse for Starmer. Just weeks after his government pushed through controversial legislation, these revelations paint a picture of an administration that may have been operating under entirely different motivations than what was presented to the public. The opposition is already calling for his immediate resignation. Within hours of the broadcast, social media erupted. The hashtag demanding Starmer's resignation trended number 1 across the United Kingdom. But here's what makes this different from previous political scandals. This isn't based on hearsay or anonymous sources. The documents appear to be authentic, verified by multiple independent analysts. The recordings, according to audio forensics experts, show no signs of manipulation. This is real and it's happening in real time. Now let's talk about what exactly these documents reveal. According to sources who've reviewed the leaked materials, there are communications that allegedly show coordination between government officials and private interests on matters of significant public concern. We're talking about policy decisions, appointments to crucial positions, and financial arrangements that were never disclosed to Parliament. One particularly damaging document appears to be an internal memo discussing strategies to manage public perception around a controversial policy. The language used suggests a level of calculated manipulation that directly contradicts Starmer's campaign promises of transparency and accountability. Another leaked recording allegedly captures conversations about handling media inquiries regarding matters that were supposed to be subject to independent review. If these materials are authentic, and so far no one from the government has successfully disputed their legitimacy, then we're looking at a crisis of trust that goes far beyond typical political point scoring. This touches on fundamental questions about how decisions are made at the highest levels of government. The reaction from within Starmer's own party has been telling. Several Labour MPs who spoke to journalists, though refusing to go on record, expressed shock and concern. One described the leaked materials as potentially career-ending. Another suggested that if the allegations are proven true, resignation would be the only honourable path forward. Even members of the cabinet have been notably silent. The usual defenders who would typically flood the airwaves dismissing such claims as politically motivated attacks have been conspicuously absent. This silence speaks volumes. Political insiders know that in situations like this, silence often precedes abandonment. When your own team won't defend you, the writing is already on the wall. Meanwhile, opposition leaders are having a field day. The Conservative Party, still reeling from their own recent troubles, has found new energy. They're demanding an emergency session of Parliament. They want Starmer to face questions directly. They want answers about how such sensitive materials could exist in the first place. And more importantly, they want to know if the allegations contained within these documents are accurate. But here's what's really fascinating about this whole situation. The source of the leak remains unknown. Nobody knows who had access to these materials or why they've chosen this moment to release them. Some are speculating it's a whistleblower from within the government itself, someone who could no longer stay silent about what they were witnessing. Others suggest it it could be the work of investigative journalists who've been digging for months. There's even speculation about foreign involvement, though that seems like the kind of conspiracy theory that emerges whenever something this big breaks. What we do know is that whoever leaked this information had deep access to highly confidential materials. This wasn't some low-level staffer grabbing a few emails. This was someone with clearance to the most sensitive communications at the highest levels of government. And they made sure these documents reached people who would know exactly what to do with them. The public response has been intense. On the streets of London, Manchester, Birmingham, and cities across the UK, people are talking about nothing else. Trust in government, already at historic lows following years of political turbulence, has taken another massive hit. For many voters who supported Labour, specifically because they were exhausted by scandal and promised a return to honest governance, these revelations feel like a betrayal. Social media is flooded with reactions ranging from outrage to resignation to dark humour about the state of British politics. Some are calling for Starmer's immediate resignation. Others are demanding a full independent investigation before any conclusions are drawn. But virtually everyone agrees that this cannot simply be brushed aside or managed with clever PR tactics. The scale of these revelations demands accountability at the highest level. And accountability in cases like this typically means one thing: resignation. The pressure is building with every passing hour. News outlets that initially approached the story with caution, wanting to verify details before making strong claims, are now running with it as their lead story. International media has picked it up. The world is watching Britain go through yet another political crisis. The leaked materials reportedly span several months, perhaps even longer. They allegedly show a pattern of behaviour rather than isolated incidents. This is crucial because it's much harder to dismiss systematic issues as mere mistakes or misunderstandings. If the documents tell a story of ongoing practices that contradict public statements, then we're dealing with something far more serious than a single error in judgment. One leaked email chain apparently discusses polling data and how certain policy announcements could be timed to maximise political benefit while minimising public scrutiny. Another document allegedly outlines talking points for ministers to use when questioned about decisions that were already made behind closed doors. The picture that emerges from these materials is one of a government more concerned with managing appearances than with genuine transparency. Now, it's important to note that political management is not inherently sinister. Every government engages in strategic communication, but there's a line between effective communication and deliberate deception. And according to these leaks, that line may have been crossed repeatedly. Legal experts are already weighing in on potential ramifications beyond resignation. Depending on the nature of what's in these documents, there could be legal consequences for individuals involved. We could be looking at investigations, inquiries, and possibly even criminal proceedings if laws were broken. The Metropolitan Police have already confirmed they're reviewing the leaked materials to determine if any criminal activity is indicated. This is standard procedure when allegations of this magnitude emerge, but it adds another layer of pressure on Starmer and his government. The political opposition is preparing for what could be a historic moment. If Starmer does resign, it would trigger a leadership contest within the Labour Party and potentially force a general election, depending on how events unfold. The Conservative Party, despite their own recent struggles, sees an opportunity to regain ground. They're positioning themselves as the party that will clean up this mess and restore proper governance. Whether the public will buy that narrative given recent history remains to be seen. But in politics, timing is everything. And right now, the timing favours anyone who isn't Keir Starmer. Inside number 10 Downing Street, sources describe an atmosphere of crisis management bordering on chaos. Emergency meetings have been convened. Senior advisors are reportedly working around the clock trying to formulate a response that doesn't make things worse. But here's the problem they're facing. Every statement they've issued so far has only raised more questions. Their initial response called the leaks a distraction from the government's important work. That didn't go down well. People don't consider allegations of this severity to be mere distractions. Their second attempt acknowledged the existence of the documents but questioned their authenticity and context. That also backfired when independent verification confirmed the materials appeared genuine. Now they're stuck in the worst possible position, unable to deny the authenticity, unable to explain away the contents, and rapidly running out of credible options. The Prime Minister himself has remained largely out of sight since the story broke. He made one brief statement saying he takes these matters seriously and that a full review would be conducted. But that's exactly the kind of vague, non-committal response that infuriates people in moments like this. The public doesn't want reviews and investigations that take months. They want answers now. They want to know if their Prime Minister betrayed their trust. The media frenzy shows no signs of slowing down. 24-hour news channels have cleared their schedules to provide continuous coverage. Every political commentator in Britain has weighed in. Former government officials, some who served under Starmer and some from previous administrations, are being interviewed about what this means for British democracy. The consensus among many observers is that Starmer's position has become untenable. Even if he wants to fight and stay in office, the political costs of doing so may be too high. His ability to govern effectively has been severely compromised. How can he negotiate with foreign leaders when this scandal dominates headlines? How can he push legislation through Parliament when his own moral authority has been called into question? How can he lead a party when members are privately expressing doubts about his judgment? These are not rhetorical questions. They're practical considerations that will determine whether he can continue in office, regardless of what he personally wants. Let's look at the historical precedents. British political history is filled with resignations forced by scandal. Some prime ministers fought until the bitter end and were ultimately removed by their own party. Others recognised when their position became impossible and stepped down with at least some dignity intact. The ones who are remembered most favourably are typically those who took responsibility and left on their own terms rather than clinging to power until they were forcibly removed. Starmer, who has built his career on projecting integrity and competence, faces a choice between these paths. Does he dig in and fight, potentially dragging this scandal out for weeks or months? Or does he accept that the game is up and resign before things get even worse? Political strategists suggest that if he's going to resign, sooner is better than later. Every day he remains in office while these allegations swirl around him does more damage to his legacy and to his party. But resignation is never an easy decision, especially for someone who worked their entire life to reach the position of Prime Minister. The leaked documents have also exposed rifts within the government that were previously hidden from public view. Several cabinet ministers are reportedly furious that they were kept in the dark about matters that now make them look complicit or foolish. There are rumours of confrontations behind closed doors, with senior figures demanding explanations they're not receiving. This internal division is perhaps just as dangerous to Starmer's position as the external pressure from opposition and media. A Prime Minister can survive a lot if their own team remains loyal and unified, but once that loyalty starts to fracture, once cabinet members start positioning themselves for a post-Starmer future, the end comes quickly. We've seen this pattern before in British politics. The final days of a failing Prime Minister often follow a similar trajectory: initial defiance, followed by crumbling support, followed by private conversations where the truth is delivered, followed by resignation. All signs suggest we're somewhere in the middle of that process right now. Public opinion polls, while preliminary since the scandal just broke, show a dramatic shift in how voters view the Prime Minister. His approval ratings, which were already facing challenges, have plummeted. More significantly, the percentage of voters who say they trust him has reached a new low. In politics, you can sometimes recover from being unpopular, but it's nearly impossible to govern when the public doesn't trust you. Trust is the foundation of political authority in a democracy. Once it's broken, it's extraordinarily difficult to rebuild, especially when the breaking point involves leaked evidence rather than just allegations. People might forgive a politician they don't trust if they believe the politician is competent and delivers results. They might tolerate a politician who makes mistakes if they believe the politician is fundamentally honest. But a politician who appears both dishonest and whose competence is now in question faces an almost impossible path forward. The international implications of this crisis shouldn't be overlooked either. Britain is navigating complex relationships with the European Union, managing its role in NATO during a time of global instability, and maintaining its special relationship with the United States. All of this requires stable, credible leadership. Foreign governments are watching this scandal unfold with concern. They need to know who they're dealing with and whether agreements made today will still be honoured tomorrow. A Prime Minister fighting for political survival is a weakened negotiating partner. Some international observers are already speculating about what a change in British leadership might mean for ongoing discussions and treaties. This adds another dimension of pressure on Starmer. It's not just about domestic politics anymore. His ability to represent Britain on the world stage has been compromised by these revelations, and the financial markets have also reacted to the uncertainty. The pound has experienced volatility as traders factor in the possibility of political instability leading to economic policy changes. Business leaders have expressed concern about the impact this crisis might have on investment and economic planning. While political scandals don't always translate directly into economic consequences, prolonged uncertainty at the highest levels of government can create an environment where businesses hesitate to make major commitments. The longer this crisis continues without resolution, the greater the potential for economic fallout. This creates yet another source of pressure for a resolution, which in practical terms likely means Starmer's resignation followed by a swift transition to new leadership. The markets and the business community generally prefer stability and clarity, even if it comes through a change in leadership rather than ongoing uncertainty under a weakened Prime Minister. So where do things stand right now at this very moment? Keir Starmer is still technically the Prime Minister, but his grip on power appears to be loosening by the hour. The leaked documents continue to be analysed by journalists, legal experts and political opponents looking for additional damaging revelations. Each new detail that emerges makes his position more precarious. His communications team is trying to control the narrative, but they're playing defence in a game where the offence has all the momentum. Within the Labour Party, discussions about succession are reportedly already taking place, though publicly everyone maintains they support the Prime Minister. This is standard political theatre. Nobody wants to be seen as disloyal before the inevitable happens, but everyone wants to be positioned correctly for what comes after. The most likely scenario, according to political insiders, is that Starmer will receive a delegation of senior party figures who will deliver the hard truth. His position is untenable and resignation is the only path forward that doesn't destroy the party's credibility completely. The timeline for when this might happen is unclear. Some predict it could be within days. Others think he might try to hold on through the weekend, hoping that some new development shifts the narrative. But few serious observers believe he can survive this in the long term. The combination of damaging leaked evidence, public outrage, media pressure, internal party division, and loss of trust creates a perfect storm that historically has only one outcome. What remains to be seen is whether Starmer recognises this reality and acts accordingly, or whether he forces his party to take more drastic measures to remove him. The latter option would be messier and more damaging for everyone involved, which is why there's intense pressure for him to make the decision himself. If and when resignation comes, the immediate question will be about who replaces him. The Labour Party would need to conduct a leadership election, which could take weeks or even months, depending on the rules they follow. In the interim, a caretaker leader would need to be appointed, likely the Deputy Prime Minister. This person would have the unenviable task of trying to stabilise the government while also potentially being a candidate for the permanent position. The various factions within Labour are already manoeuvring, identifying potential candidates and building coalitions. This is normal political behaviour, but it also means that even as everyone publicly supports the current Prime Minister, privately they're preparing for his departure. The hypocrisy is obvious but entirely typical of how politics works at this level. What does all of this mean for ordinary British citizens? In practical terms, governance continues even during political crises. Civil servants keep working, policies remain in effect, and the machinery of government grinds forward regardless of who occupies the top position. But politically and symbolically, These moments matter enormously. They shape public trust in institutions. They determine which parties and politicians are taken seriously in future elections. They create narratives that persist for years. If the allegations in these leaked documents are proven true, and if Starmer resigns in disgrace, it will reinforce the deep cynicism many people already feel about politics and politicians. The promise of a return to integrity and honest governance will have been revealed as hollow. This damages not just one politician or one party, but faith in the democratic system itself. That's why these moments are about more than political point scoring. They're about whether citizens believe their leaders are fundamentally honest and working in the public interest. The opposition parties face their own challenges in this moment. While they're enjoying the political advantages of their opponents' troubles, they also need to be careful not to appear too gleeful or opportunistic. The public wants accountability and justice, not partisan gloating. The most effective opposition strategy is to appear statesmanlike, demanding answers and transparency while offering an alternative vision for governance. The Conservative Party in particular is trying to rebuild its own credibility after recent troubles, so they need to strike the right tone. Too aggressive and they risk seeming like they're just playing politics with a serious matter. Too passive and they miss an opportunity to demonstrate leadership. It's a delicate balance that requires political skill to navigate successfully. For Keir Starmer personally, these must be the darkest days of his political career. He's gone from opposition leader to prime minister to potentially resigning in disgrace in what, historically speaking, is a very short period of time. The human element of this should not be ignored. Regardless of what the leaked documents reveal about his actions in office, he's a person facing the collapse of his reputation and legacy. The pressure he's under right now is immense and unrelenting. Every decision he makes is scrutinised, every statement is picked apart. His family is affected, his future is uncertain. None of this excuses whatever actions the leaked documents reveal, but it's worth remembering that political scandals involve human beings dealing with extraordinary pressure and consequences. How he handles the next few days will likely define how history remembers him. Will he be remembered as someone who tried to cover up wrongdoing and clung to power? Or as someone who, when confronted with undeniable evidence of mistakes, took responsibility and stepped aside? That choice is largely in his hands right now. The final question is what comes next for British politics more broadly? This scandal, coming after years of political turbulence, raises serious questions about the health of the democratic system. Why do these patterns keep repeating? Why does it seem like each new government, regardless of party, ends up mired in scandal and broken promises? These are not easy questions to answer, but they're essential ones for the future of British democracy. Some argue the problem is systemic, that the concentration of power at the top creates opportunities and temptations for abuse that are difficult to resist. Others point to media culture and the constant pressure for political advantage that makes genuine governance almost impossible. Still others blame the politicians themselves for lacking the integrity and character required for such positions. The truth is likely some combination of all these factors. But until these deeper issues are addressed, we'll likely continue seeing cycles of hope and disappointment, promise and scandal, election and resignation. The Starmer crisis is just the latest chapter in this ongoing story. Whether it becomes a turning point that sparks real reform or just another entry in a long list of political failures remains to be seen. What is clear is that change is coming and coming soon. The pressure has become unsustainable. The revelations are too serious to ignore. The political mathematics don't work anymore. Resignation appears inevitable. The only questions that remain are when and how. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over, and what happens in the next few days will shape British politics for years to come.